Hello and welcome to the Artists Make Money podcast, where artists share their thoughts and feelings about money. I'm your host, Vivienne Egan. I'm an interactive theatre and comedy producer, a podcaster, and also a freelance business writer. And I really love discussing all of the different ways artists build their incomes and how they feel about money and all of their weird hang-ups. Today's guest is actor, novelist, and comedian Sukh Ojla. We talked about her journey to being a full-time creative and how it came about that she is in the last stages of writing her novel. Very exciting. We talked about managing imposter syndrome, the difficulties of saving for a house as a self-employed artist, and forgiving past financial mistakes. This episode of Artists Make Money is brought to you by our friends at Side Hustle Sites. They make designer flat pack websites, like the IKEA of websites, with helpful instructions and guides for how to make your website look really great. It is cheaper than Squarespace, and their templates are actually specialized to particular jobs. So they've got templates for theatre professionals and for freelance writers. I'm actually about to use them to build my freelance writing website because I don't have one. Or they can actually design you a website from scratch, which they did for me on the Artists Make Money website. If you sign up via sidehustle-sites.com/AMM, I will link that in the show notes, you will get a fantastic, professional looking website and your first month subscription free and the second month half price. That is just for Artists Make Money listeners. On with the show. Hello, Sukh. Welcome to Artists Make Money. Would you please tell the listeners who you are and how you make your money?
Hi, my name is Sukh. I make my money from acting and writing and doing stand-up, and I think that's it.
I think that's
I think that's enough. Yeah.
So, so you're a stand-up comic. You act in TV, most recently in Feel Good Season 2. Very cool. Can't wait to see.
My research.
And you are just about to publish your first novel.
Yeah.
So many exciting things to dig into and ask you about. But first, I want to ask you how long you have been making a living out of your creativity, like full-time.
So I gave up my day job in January 2015.
Mm-hmm.
So before that, for about a year or so, I was working with adults with learning disabilities. I'd been doing that for a few years, but for about a year of that time, the last year, I was also kind of going up for auditions and things. I wasn't doing acting or comedy then, so that's like a lot more recent. I wasn't doing comedy or writing. I was just acting,
Mm-hmm.
but I had this job, which was super stressful. Obviously, I'm like working as a support worker out in the community. And yeah, so I did. And then I kind of had to, I moved home. I moved in with my parents to basically keep my costs down. And and also give myself the space to not constantly be like, oh, my work, oh my God, what if my agent calls, or I get this, and then I'm gonna have to, what if they can't move my shift around? Am I gonna have to call in sick and like let people down? Yeah, so actually the mental load was like massive.
And so you quit that and then you were just like, I'm all in with the creative stuff?
Yes, yeah, terrifyingly so. And I didn't have like a cushion. I didn't have like a financial, I didn't have like a little pot or anything. I was just like, no, I didn't at all. I because I was living in London, it was minimum wage. It was a minimum wage job, which is insane considering what you're doing.
Yes, responsibility.
Yeah, but I guess, yeah, those kind of caring roles, sadly, I like that. A lot of them. And yeah, so I went home where like my parents didn't expect me to pay any rent. So I was very, very lucky. Although I like contributed by paying bills and like, food shopping and things, like anything broke in the house, I would replace it. So yeah, I still kind of paid, but wasn't like a set amount every month.
Right. And how was that, would you say, how essential was that period to you being able to kind of grow as an artist and pursue all those things?
I couldn't have done it without that.
Yeah.
I really couldn't have. There was just no way that I could have pursued comedy in the way that I have. I couldn't have taken those low paid jobs that I needed to take in the beginning to get some experience. There's no way that I could have just gone to new material nights and and it's also just energy as well, because I wasn't working 40 hours a week on a job that I didn't particularly enjoy. Like, I just had the mental space to go, okay, well, I can write maybe, or I can do stand up, or even to just think about what I'm going to do, because I wasn't constantly in survival mode like I was when I was in London, where I was constantly, money would come in and it would go out the next day. Like, your rent and your bills and everything goes up the next day. And you're like, oh, great, I have £40 to my name. And I am now just like always in my overdraft, and like always at the edge of the overdraft limit as well.
Mm.
Yeah.
How how comfortable were you in that position? Like, because some people, they don't really mind, and
Yeah,
some people
no,
it's really stressful, right?
yeah, not at all. I was constantly like, my butt was just clenched like, the whole time.
Yeah.
I was, I was incredibly anxious about that. And even actually now, this is really pertinent that we're talking about this now. I'm moving, and my rent is a bit higher because it's, it's not London prices, but I'm moving to a city centre flat, and my rent is about £100 more than I pay now, plus some bills that I don't pay now because I'm in a short-term kind of letting situation where pretty much all the bills are included. And I couldn't sleep last night. And it was like that kind of, sometimes you catch a thought just as you're going to bed and you spiral.
Mm.
And I was like, oh my gosh, and your costs are going to go up. And what if you can't do it? And that is trauma from when I lived in London and was constantly like, no, I can't pay this. I'm going to have to move this around. Or, I'm going to have to call somebody and be like, oh, I'm really sorry, I can't pay this bill until this date. All of that fear is still really like, it's inside me somewhere, even though that was 6 years ago, longer, probably like 6.5 years ago. I'm in a better position now. I do have savings. Like I have a cushion. Also, I have a lot more work coming in. Like, when I moved home, I didn't have work coming in. I had one income stream, one very volatile income. Wasn't even a stream. It was like a trickle. And I'd get those like little royalty checks like every few months and be like, oh my God, thank God, it's like £38. Okay, fine, great, thank God.
What was the royalty check for?
Like, it just for like acting jobs that I'd done, but it would be like £4 from this, £7 from this. We've showed, EastEnders in Malaysia, so it's, here you go, £8.50. You're like, great, thank you. And you never really know when they're going to come either, and they're always around like that amount, so it's never like life changing. But for me, it would be like, okay, fine, I can go and I can get some food in, or I can pay my phone bill or whatever. So yeah.
Wow. That's so interesting because it's kind of like, yeah, there's this idea in like sort of entrepreneur kind of circles where you have like passive income where you do the work once and then you get paid for it forever, which is like exactly what that is. But like you also have no control over, like, you can't go out and sell that episode of EastEnders to a country or a network or something. So it's not like you can have any influence over like how much or how little it is. It's just like, oh, great,
Yeah.
pocket money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not nothing. What do you do with that money now? Does it just like all go into like your savings or your whatever, or
Yeah, it just kind of gets swallowed up. I don't do anything kind of like particular with it. I have started kind of tracking my income a lot more and being a lot more kind of conscious of what's coming in, and my saving is much better because I'm not spending as much because I'm happier. So I think I was spending a lot more on clothes and just like stuff that I didn't really need before, just because I wasn't happy. Whereas now I'm like, yeah, I don't really need much. Like,
that is so real. That is such a good observation and a good thing to know about yourself as well.
mm,
I definitely do that with like takeaway food or
yeah,
yeah, I treat myself with food generally.
yeah, 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 yeah. Same.
But it's so like yeah, and but also then if you know that that's what your kind of pattern is, then you can be like maybe I can do something to break that this time or
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
coming up again. So it's interesting. When did you start doing the stand up then? If you were kind of mainly pursuing acting?
So stand up I started doing in 2016,
Hmm.
but like I wasn't like, I'm gonna go and do stand up. It was kind of, I fell into it and I was like, oh yeah, I don't really know any comedians. I don't really, okay, I might do this gig. So it was very much like I didn't have any friends in the industry. I didn't like know anybody well enough to be like, oh hi, like how do you, and also nobody tells you how to be a stand-up comedian. Like that's not something your careers advisor like talks to you about in school. It's like a viable career path, and thank God. But like I didn't know how to do it, and I couldn't like afford to do a course or anything. And the only reason I started doing it was because there was a free workshop at the South Bank Centre in 2015, and I'd moved home about 3 months before, plus broken up with my boyfriend.
Oh,
And at the time, as someone that I like, we hadn't been together long, I think only about 5 or 6 months. But it was one of those ones where I was like, okay, things are going really well. So I'm going to move home for like a year. And then like by the end of that year, like we'll be ready to move in together. And then like that'll be, yeah, it was one of those. And it broke me. Like I was just devastated. And because I didn't want to look at my feelings, I went I went and did this workshop, which I thought was a writing workshop, and actually turned out to be stand-up comedy. So
oh,
what a happy mistake.
wow, that's great. And you've done so well.
Ah, thank you.
Yeah, totally. That's very interesting. Um, and so then like not having those sort of networks, and I don't know, I suppose it kind of feels like yeah, people kind of like know each other from university and then they go to the fringe and then they like meet up with other groups from different universities and that's kind of like the comedy scene, right? And
Yeah.
so then how does it feel kind of like coming into that as particularly, as a woman of color, like what are the kind of, barriers that you were experiencing?
I think my main barrier was just lack of information.
Yeah.
In the beginning, it was mainly just like I don't really know how to do this. Um, and then I think as you get on, I mean, my biggest barrier just generally in life is lack of confidence. Like that is always just my biggest thing. Like it's, I'm like, if I had confidence, like it would be over for you all. Like if I
I mean, I
nothing,
believe it. If this is
right?
something you
Like
can achieve
if
without,
nothing else, if nothing else in my life changed but my confidence levels, oh my, like I would be queen of the world. So like confidence is my biggest barrier, not knowing obviously that lack of information. And then as you get on, you know, then it's more kind of like lecture promoters or like people being like, yeah, we've already got one of you on the lineup, or bitter old men telling you that, well, actually, you need to do this for 10 years and then you might be good enough to like get a spot.
great.
And I just like, even though I don't have that kind of confidence in like in myself, there's a really, I don't really know what if there's a term for it, or yeah, maybe there isn't, I don't know. There's like a tiny little kernel deep down where I know that no matter what happens, I will be absolutely fine. I don't know if that's faith or like what it is, but I always, even in the darkest, crappiest times of my life, I've gone, everything's going to be fine. Like you're going to be fine. So I think that is kind of what's kind of kept me going after doing all those crappy gigs for like no money and then having a Tesco meal deal for dinner and
Yeah.
nobody laughing at your jokes and you kind of going, oh my God, what am I doing? And also having 3 very volatile income streams, which is what an accountant told me recently.
Thank you.
I was like, thanks, mate.
Oh dear. You know what? I have an accountant as well, and he's very supportive actually, and he's like, this kind of thing, it can just blow up overnight sometimes, and it's like, thanks, buddy.
He sounds like the guy I spoke to. How nice.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Is
nice.
it is it an accountant who deals with people like in the arts and in media and stuff, or no? Okay.
I think he might have some clients, but like in general, like no.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I was like, oh, it is, but I think what that actually does is you go like, oh, there's someone who's respecting like what I do for a living and who like believes in it, and
Mm,
even though like obviously financial value isn't the only kind of value that a creative
yeah.
life can bring you, but that's what we're here to talk about, right? It's
Yeah.
like it's a very fraught relationship, and it's about how we value ourselves in this capitalist world and what
Yeah.
the society is telling us. So
Yeah. And monetizing your art and monetizing your passion, and then like creativity seeming to be like the absolute opposite of that, isn't it? It's like, being free to create, like freedom and flow is so important to creativity, but I'm not having freedom or flow if I've got like a deadline, or if I'm like doing a gig, because if I don't do this gig, I'm not going to be able to pay my rent. Like, yeah,
or if your butt is constantly clenched.
clenched constantly.
It's the opposite of free flow, but then anyway, so you started doing some stand up, and you've been to the Fringe, and you've done a couple of tours, or
First tour. This is my first
first
tour.
tour. Ah,
Yeah.
that's right, because it was,
It was postponed.
of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah, yeah,
So I've read that as two tours, um, and so then you started to write a novel. Tell us the process of all of that. How did
yeah. I mean, the novel was like real divine timing for me, because like when the tour got postponed, I'd worked so hard on it, and it got pulled 5 minutes before I was about to go on stage.
really?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like my heart fell out of my ass, and like I was just like, can I say ass?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great.
Whatever you want.
Said it now. Said
Market explicit.
so yeah, and it was, I had such an extreme stress response to it that I kind of just took to bed for about a month, or like 2 months almost. I was like, and also because on top of that, obviously pandemic panic, we didn't really know what this was. Then I got COVID. Then I was like, there were no tests at that time, and you couldn't just go and get a test. And I was calling 111, and they were like, stay indoors, don't leave the house. And I've got parents who are like 70 and both have health conditions. So I was literally just quarantining in my room, not leaving my room. Just being like, don't use the upstairs bathroom, just use the taps, like to my parents.
Yeah.
And like not going into the kitchen or anything. Like, it was a horrible time. And then just as I was kind of resurfacing, I was like, oh, okay, what do we do now? Like, my plan was to buy a house, my plan was to do that tour, my plan was like, all these plans. And my agent at the time sent me a message saying, oh, I've been talking to this really lovely young lady called Sarah at Hodder Studio, and she's really interested in working with you, and she wants to know if you'd ever thought about writing a novel. And I was like, is this a scam? Like, yeah, like I don't know. And like most of the people who are like, oh, I want to write a book, you kind of go, yeah, I might write a book at some point when I'm older, when life is a bit calmer, when I'm a 65-year-old woman living by the sea, dressed in head to toe linen, wearing chunky jewelry, and like collecting fertility goddesses, and like genuinely just making younger people uncomfortable. I was like, that's the time.
I can see it now.
You can see it, right? And I was like, that's when I'll do it. And so when I had this conversation with Sarah, who's now my editor, she was like, do you want to, she was like, I've seen your stand-up, I've seen your play. She's like, do you want to write about this kind of thing? And I was like, yeah. She's like, so we've got a proposal for you. I was like,
Ow.
okay, cool. I know nothing about publishing, just like I knew nothing about comedy and still don't really know a great deal about it. But this happens quite often when they approach people who are already in some sort of entertainment industry or like adjacent to writing. So I was like, well, what is this? And I also just, oh my God, like my imposter syndrome has just been massive since all of this has happened, of course. There was a part of me that was like, I don't deserve this because I didn't write a book and I'm not like pitching it to publishers. So but she was like, no, it happens a lot. Like it happens a lot, don't worry. And I was like, okay. And then I just had to write a sample and then they had to say like yes or no. And I was so stressed. It was between lockdowns at this point in the summer, like when things are slightly more open. And I I actually went to Margate, which is where I'm living right now, because I was like, I know that you're taking that to your big meeting. You're taking my sample to the big meeting, and then you're going to make a decision. So, and I feel like I'm on the precipice of something really exciting, and it might happen, it might not. So if I'm going to get bad news, I want to be by the sea. Because I was like, at least if I'm getting bad news, I'm not in like my childhood bedroom, like just crying about it. I can go to the beach and cry about it, right? Everything's better when you're at the beach.
Totally.
And so yeah. Anyway, I got the book deal, and now I'm writing a novel, and yeah, and then there's an advance, right? Because we're talking about money, like there's an advance, which I didn't really know about, and this is what really pisses me off about the whole conversation. Well, one of the things that really annoys me about the conversation around money is that nobody talks about how much you should get paid for stuff. And I think that really that can really mess you up. That can really kind of, I think, that's a huge disadvantage to a lot of people. So when I was like, oh, I don't want to ask the conversation about like, is there an advance? What does an advance mean? How does it work? Because I don't want to be seen as like being money grabbing, but also I'm like, I need to know, like, could this be something or not? So then I'm like looking online, and like a lot of the articles are American, and they're like, it could be anything from $6,000 to like $1 million or whatever. And I was like,
great, helpful.
I was like, okay, which end? Like, that's really, I don't know. They're like, but if you're like newer, and then there's a lot of kind of, you're not going to make any money off writing a book. So just be aware, you're not going to make any money writing a book. And I was like, I mean, I want to write a book, but I also don't want to write it for nothing. It's a lot of work. I was saying to my friend the other day, I was like, I really don't want to work out what my hourly rate is for writing a book, because I would be about 3p. Like in terms of like the hours that you actually spend on it. Anyway, it was a healthy advance, and it was thankfully nowhere near the 6,000 mark, but also nowhere near the $1 million mark, unfortunately. But it kind of meant that it took the pressure off a little bit. Just, it kind of just went, okay, it took the pressure off a little bit, because I wasn't getting any more money coming in at the time from doing anything really.
I think this knowledge that sometimes they come to you and say, would you like to write a book, is really useful, because like anyone who I meet who, I mean, I don't know much about the publishing industry, but it seems to make sense that you would identify someone who has an existing platform and audience, and also like a clear kind of niche, or like a group of people who might be interested in reading their book, because then all of it feeds each other, and then someone buys your book and then they go to your comedy show, and vice versa. So I always kind of say to people, like, probably like just build a platform somewhere, like just start tweeting, just grow a Twitter following, something. So like, I think that's very useful to know. But like, amazing that they came to you and pitched you. It means that like you're on people's radars, and they're like, oh, she's going places.
Oh, that's terrifying.
Yeah, it's great. So you mentioned that you have savings now. When did you start feeling comfortable enough to start saving? And like, do you is it a set amount that you save each month, or do you have like a proportion of, how does it work?
So before this, I would do 50-50. If I got a big paycheck, it would be 50-50, but then I was living at my parents and I wasn't paying rent. And this was pre-pandemic. But I think I only really started saving in 2019, and I did a tour, which I only really took for the money, because it was a nice chunk of change, and my expenses would be minimal, because it was like accommodation, everything, travel was all paid for. So I basically saved all of that money, and that was like great. And I'd had like a LISA for a while, like the lifetime ISA for a little bit. So I maxed that out. I opened up a Help to Buy, and I was like just putting in like the minimum into the maximum into the Help and Buy, which is like £200 a month, and then into the LISA I would just kind of put in bits and pieces. And now, because my income is not as steady as it was pre-pandemic still, even though stuff is coming in, thankfully, I do roundups. So, which I find really kind of like satisfying to be like, well, I don't notice if I've bought something for £6.80 and you're going to round it up to £7. I'm not going to notice that 20p as much. Whereas if I'm like, oh, £250 out of my month, a month is going into my LISA, I would notice it. So I do roundups for that. And I kind of shift any money into like a separate pot that I'm like, if I've got some money coming in, I'll just shift whatever I don't think I'm going to spend into a separate pot, so that I don't see it in my current account and go, yay, that's, I just spend that as well. So that's my little kind of trick, to be like out of sight, out of mind. And then it's just a nice surprise if you open it up, but also great to know that it's there. So like, I'm moving soon. I know that moving is expensive because I'm moving into a place and I've got to just buy stuff. Like, I don't have stuff anymore. Like, I don't have like cutlery and crockery, like all those kind of things. It's like I know that there's going to be some outlay. So I mean, when people are like, oh, money doesn't buy you happiness, I'm like, sure, it might not make you happy, but I always think money gives you options. Like, exactly. and I think that, and it gives you freedom. It really, really does. To kind of go from like, like now at the moment I'm in deadline week, and knowing that I can just go, I've got the money to go out and buy some really nice ready meals because I don't have the energy or the capacity to cook, is great. Knowing that I can go, actually, I'm going to have a takeaway tonight because I can't eat, like there's nothing in the fridge or whatever, or I haven't had a chance to do this. Great, because it means I can focus on my work. Whereas, obviously you can't, and that's just like a very kind of small example of like what it buys you. But even things like, so I'm going to have to move in with my parents for a few weeks while my Birmingham flat is ready. And I was like, I'm going to go mad, just like working in my bedroom on this novel, like, and it's coming to the end, and I'm going to get a workspace in London. And it's like, I can do that because I can afford to, even though there's a part of me that's like, you shouldn't do that. That was like very spendy. Like, you should go work in the library. And I'm like, cool. Are you going to have a good experience working in your local library where it's going to be probably going to be a bit noisy, probably going to be a bit chaotic, don't really have very nice facilities? Or are you going to have a better experience going to a workspace in London where you're on the train every morning, which was great for you because for me, I'm like out of that space and I'm in work mode now, where I've got really good Wi-Fi, plug sockets, a designated desk, teas and coffees, and everybody's in work mode. So it's kind of like I can now invest in myself and in my work.
100%.
And feel guilty all the while.
Obviously still feel guilty. Where does the guilt come from?
I grew up in like a single income household. So we're working class. Like, my dad was a builder before he retired. My mum was a machinist when I was younger, and then she had to give up work because of her health. And so in my house, there was always a real scarcity mindset. There's no money. Like, I remember even as a little kid just being like, I can't have that, there's no money, which is so damaging to you as you get older, and you realize now it's like, I feel so guilty for any sort of treat that I give myself or anything like that. I mean, sometimes I can talk myself into it and go, look at this logically, but but really that's where it comes from. And the truth is, my parents are actually very comfortable, but they were brought up in their scarcity mindset and real kind of extreme frugality. So like, I'm a spendthrift to them because I might sometimes go for I don't know, nice butter. Like, to them that's like, well, you need to. And the great thing about them is like they never had credit cards, they never had an overdraft. They were like, you only spend what you've got. And that's something that I've like, I think that's also probably why I didn't like being in any sort of debt, and being in like the overdraft thing was just like so terrifying to me. Like my friend recently was like, been in my overdraft for like 10 years, and I was like, oh my god. I was in my overdraft for 3, and I was like, it was the worst feeling ever. So the thing that they've drummed into me is like, if you don't have it, like don't spend it. Like, you know, it's not your money. And I think that's been really useful for me as a kind of, that's been drummed into me. But yeah, but as a whole, like you know, they have this whole mindset that it's really hard to earn money. You know, it's really tough to earn money. You have to work hard to earn money, and it's got to be difficult and horrible, and you have to be unhappy, but then you also cannot spend it at all. And as a result, like I just used to spend money on crap when I was younger, because I was like, yeah, fuck, you know, I'm earning my own money now, I'm gonna just whatever, like buy rubbish. But I've calmed down in the last few years. So I think, but that's like almost like a rebellion thing in itself, isn't it? Like when you grow up, I think you either end up being like your parents, or you just go, I'm absolutely going to be nothing like you. I'm going to buy this pair of sparkly heels. Like,
yeah, that's so, the narratives we grow up with are so powerful.
yeah.
And it takes a lot of work to kind of recognize them, catch them, like when you're just doing it unconsciously. Yeah. But how great. I love that you were like, I'm going to invest in myself, because that's exactly what you're doing. Like you're writing a book. It's going to be your first book, and like you can't just, you know,
Yeah.
you have the money, so you don't have to
Yeah.
the cheapo way. You can do it in
Yeah, absolutely. Like I don't have to kind of be like at my little kind of fold down desk in my childhood bedroom, like a little praying mantis over my keyboard, just being like, what am I gonna do? You know, just being absolutely miserable while my mum's like, you know, shouting at the telly downstairs, and my dad's like on the phone, and like for a couple of 70-year-olds, they're very loud. And so it's like I can just like, I can give myself the gift of going, I'm gonna go away and do this. And in the same way that like I didn't have to leave my parents' place, but I was like, if I'm going to write this book, I need to be somewhere peaceful. I need to be away. I need to be in the right mindset. And it's been amazing. It's kind of worked out really well.
Fab. Um, so, oh yeah, that was it. You were saying you were planning to buy a house, and now you're moving into a rented place. So what has happened? What has changed?
Well, I had to dip into my house, my little house fund, which made me sad. But that's what it was there for, really. That cushion was there for that. I didn't put it in an ISA for a reason, because I was like, have that few extra grand just there, like have that extra like 5 grand there, just in case something happens. And thank God I did, because it just meant that like, you know, I could move out, I could rent the place, I could do all of that when I didn't really have that much money coming in. So the plan is to buy a house before my next birthday, which is just under a year away. Which I can do now. Things are opening up. I probably need to look for another income stream, I think, just because I'm like, you know, I kind of need something that's a bit more, unless something, I mean, here's the thing, as you know, with our industry, something could happen, like I could get a phone call after we like log off today, and it could be like, oh, by the way, that script just got commissioned, here's like, you know, or your book just got optioned, or whatever, like, you know, it could, and that could be like a big chunk of change, and I'd be like, oh babe, I don't need to have another income stream, like I got my house. But I think I think there's something needs to shift, or I need to find another way to make money. But I think that's the thing that was keeping me up until 1:30 this morning, was I was like, well, what do I do? Because I'm not really in a position now, like I was a few years ago, where I could go, oh, let me work somewhere part-time, then let me do this on the side, because this is like, I'm lucky enough that my career is kind of taking off and things are happening. So I can't really commit to doing a bar job or temping in an office, or, you know, so it has to be something else, freelance, something else volatile.
Yes.
But that kind of brings more that brings kind of more income in, really.
Yeah.
And maybe I won't need to. Maybe I'll go on tour and everything will be fine, and I'll be gigging and stuff. There's always, but that, you know, sometimes in time in our kind of life where you've got, oh, I've got a big project and I've got a big project in September, but now I've got 2 months where like I'm prepping for that project, but I'm not bringing in a lot of money.
Hmm.
So like what do you do? And sometimes I'm like, do I just play chicken now and just wait? Just wait for that, or do I kind of, and yeah, that's the thing that I'm kind of going, I
Yeah.
need to find another income stream that's not like selling feet pics on OnlyFans, or not that that's not like a valid thing to do, but also just seems like a lot of work, and also I need a pedicure. um
uh, what are you thinking? I'm interested. Let's brainstorm. What do you?
Yeah, actually, I would. I don't know. Well, somebody got in touch with me to do, and this is my own thing. This I should do this, and I've not been doing it. Um, uh, Kind of, like Cameo, like those videos and stuff that people do. Yeah. So someone got in touch with me. They were like, "You've been approved to do this. Do you want to do this? Like, here's the da da da. Set up your profile." Like, I was like, "Yeah, I'm interested." And then there's a part of me that's like, "Who's gonna want a video message from you?" Like, like that's why would they want you? Like they could have a celebrity who wants to hear from you. Who's going to pay you 19.99 to like to like do this? And I'm like, maybe you should just like. There's a part of me that's like, well, you're not going to know until you do it. Like, put that post up on Instagram, put that profile up, do a little video, see what happens. Like, sure, if it is 20 quid a thing, and I get like one a week, that's 100 quid that I wasn't making before,
Mm-hmm.
right? So and that's like a nice bit of pocket money or whatever, like, so yeah. But there's also a part of me that like feels cringe because I'm worried that people are going to look at it on my Instagram and be like, no, why, like, I don't want you wishing my dad happy birthday.
Well, you don't know until you've tried, do you?
Yeah.
But of course, trying also requires some vulnerability, and that's scary.
Yeah, and like fear of failure, and yeah, putting yourself out there, and kind of all of those things. And there's nothing else, because I think I was like, I just want minimal effort and
Mm.
then like a maximum income would be great. Like a passive income thing would be obviously amazing. Like if I could, I don't know, a course.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'd have to teach people, but
Well,
like,
you've said several things actually that people don't know. You just said that your biggest barrier to entry to starting stand-up comedy was lack of information. You now have that information, and you
oh
could.
my God, I'm gonna do a call. I can feel it. I can feel it. I can just feel it. Just like it's gonna happen. Oh,
Like
yes.
a workshop, or like you could do a stand-up writing workshop. You could do a novel writing workshop. I've just written my first novel. Like, hey, let's talk about it's all fresh. You could just be like, okay, this is what I learned. You could do it. People would sign up. I would sign up.
Okay, I'm gonna do it.
Yes, yes, that's
I'm gonna do
great.
it. I'm gonna do it. I just, when and
Mm.
you get that. I don't know if you have that kind of real intuitive thing where you're like, oh God, okay, this is gonna happen, and I'm gonna go with it because it's gonna have to happen. Like,
Great. That's good.
I'm having, like, I'm actually sweating. Like, yeah, that's kind of what's gonna happen. So, thank you, babe.
You're welcome. Yeah, well, we'll promote it when you do. We'll put it on the
Yeah.
on our Instagram. Not that it's large, but it is growing.
Good. That's important, and it's also engagement, right? It's not
Yeah,
the number of followers
that's so true. That is so true.
necessarily.
Yeah. Um, so you're hoping to buy a house. That was a
So
digression.
sorry, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it's real. Like you have to go, there are, especially when you're self-employed, right? There are so many kind of hurdles that you have to clear in order to be able to buy a house, and you've got to
Yeah.
prove your income and all this kind of stuff. So, and and it takes a lot of planning as well. Like,
Yeah.
way back, you have to start thinking about, um, yeah, like maximizing your income and all of that kind of.
Mm.
Not that, yeah, obviously you always are sort of trying to maximize your income, but
But
I'm
just to make
saying,
it look good, right? Just to make it, you kind of want to make it look good. And I think the forward planning thing, you just hit the nail on the head. It's like I spoke to a mortgage broker last year,
mhm,
and in previous tax years, I've just done that thing where I've just claimed for everything that I could claim for
exactly.
because you're like, I'm
Yeah.
not really earning much money anyway. Of course, I'm going to claim this back. It's all claimable. I'm not like diddling the tax man out of
Mm,
anything. And then he was like, yeah, that's probably not the best idea. And I was like, oh. And even like with these self-employed grants. So
mm,
when I spoke to him about it, and he was like, have you claimed any of them? And I was like, yeah, of course I have. I pay my taxes. I've got no income. I've lost 90% of my income, like, which my income was all stand up before this,
yeah.
like pretty much all stand up, even though that was never the plan. And
Mm,
he was like, yeah, well, that doesn't look very attractive to lenders because they're like, oh, well, maybe, this person can't manage their finances. And I was like, you know what's not attractive? Not being able to eat. So I was like,
yeah,
I'm
it's
not going
kind
to
of
not
outrageous.
claim them, but also I can understand how it might like bite you on the arse. But I just think, and the whole like you say, it's so much harder for self-employed people. I could be bringing in so much money, but because it's not the same amount every single month,
Mm,
it's like, yeah, it's an issue. And even like with renting and stuff, when I was like doing the references and they were like, so what's your income like per year, like per month, like your monthly income? And I was like, I don't know. Some months it's £300. Some months it's £5,000. I don't know. Like, and it's everything in between.
yeah.
You just kind of have to go with it. But yeah, I mean, that needs to change because I feel like that is such an old fashioned way of looking at things, especially is now like, so many people are freelancers now.
Yes. Yeah. I can't remember the figure, but it's like, I don't know, something like a third or like an enormous amount of people,
Yeah,
maybe
it's
not full
grown.
time, but like you're working a gig on the side or whatever, which is, you know, an indictment of like the system where you have to work two jobs in order to survive.
Yeah.
Bad system. But the system can't then be like holding those people to the standards of, well, we expect you to have, you know, a full-time permanent contract that pays you a certain amount of money every year.
Mm.
Outrageous. But I think it has to change because otherwise then no one gets a mortgage and no one gets a loan for any kind or a
Right.
rental.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And also, like, I'm a single person as well. So it's also like, oh, it's one person. And like, I was looking around when I was first looking at buying a property, and I was like, do I know any single women who are self-employed who
Mm,
have bought a house without the help of their mum and dad?
yeah.
I don't think I do.
No. I don't.
Yeah.
No, I don't think I do.
And I'm like, and I love, sometimes I'm like, oh, so and so bought a house, and they're like, oh, I'm so happy to be in this house, blah blah. I never thought this day would come. Thank you so much for my mum and dad for helping me out with the deposit. And I'm like, oh, I was with you until that. And of course, if your parents can help you, then great. But I'm also like, can someone just do it on their own so that I can have a role model to
Mm,
be like, oh, here's somebody who just worked their ass off and did this all on their own and didn't like. I've had help in other ways in the sense that I lived at home without paying
yeah.
like a certain amount of rent. But the rent I paid was emotional. Um,
Yes.
yeah, I paid for it in other ways. But so I know that I'm privileged in that sense because not a lot of people have the opportunity to, work in the arts and live at home. Their parents might live way out in the countryside somewhere, or they don't have the space for them, or they just don't have that relationship or whatever. I'm lucky that my parents are like, we never want you to leave home. We want you to live here forever. So I know that I am always welcome there, even though I don't always
Yeah.
want to go. But yeah,
Yeah. I was going to ask before actually what were the like costs of living with your family?
yeah. Like you mean like the non-financial costs?
Hmm. Yeah. What did you miss out on?
Dating.
Hmm.
My parents are like pretty traditional,
Hmm.
like conservative Indian parents.
Hmm.
So that was difficult.
Yeah.
And actually, my book is about a woman who tries to date while she's living with their parents and like lives this double life. Just things like, I had to kind of modify how I dressed as well.
Mm.
I had to, be very aware of like, I couldn't be spontaneous. So they couldn't be like I'm out with some friends, and then it's like, oh, come back to our house, like let's go for, and then why don't you just stay over? It's like, I can't do that. Like, I have to plan, I have to get that last train, and because I'm an anxious person, I always had to get like the penultimate train and not like the actual last train, just in case I got like stuck somewhere. So yeah, lack of spontaneity, yeah, just like, not like, I mean, I like to walk around naked, like in my own space. Like, I think clothes are a little bit overrated if you're indoors. Like, so I think just lack of freedom in all senses. I mean, it was also great because you could also be like, I'd come home and have a shit day, and my mum would be like, I'll put the kettle on. And like, that's what you don't get, obviously, when you live on your own, you don't, so I've got that. I've got someone to do that. I've got someone to watch telly with. I've got some, I know that they're okay as well. Like, if anything happens, like, I'm on hand to be like, it's okay, we got this. But yeah, the kind of mental costs that you pay, it's a lot. And I think people don't talk about this, because I think we see a lot of people going, or like in the news and stuff, they're like, oh, loads of people moving back in with their parents, loads of young people moving back in with their parents, and and they can't, they have to live there, and nobody talks about, I mean, I don't know what it's like from the parents' perspective. Maybe some parents are like, oh my God, I thought our job was done and now you're back and you're 25 or whatever. So I'm sure that's not great for them either. But I think, yeah, I think for me, it was really tough. It was really, really tough. And I think in the beginning, I quite enjoyed it, because I was like, I'd been living on my own for a bit, and I'd been living in London, and I was like, oh, this is familiar, fine, great, whatever. But I think as time went on, as I got into therapy, as I became a lot more self-aware of myself and my needs and the narratives in our family, I was like, okay, this is like, it's time for you to go. It's like, it's time for you to move, and it's time for you to move on. And also, I think when you live in a house where everything has to be done a certain way, like, I've got a mum who's like, no, that's not how you do it, that's how you do it, no, put it, it's like, you can't cut up an onion without her being like, oh, you're doing it, no, that's not how you do it. And I'm like, I'm 37, you taught me to cook when I was 7, I'm now 37. Like, I know you've taught me, like, this, I literally do everything, like, with the way I cook, the way I, like, I do it in the way that she's taught me.
Yeah.
So not having that is great. Also, I think when I first moved out, because I was that much older, because I'd have that time there, because I'd had all this therapy, and I've been thinking a lot more about, why do I do the things that I do? Why do I think the way that I do? Not in an exhausting way, but just in a kind of like a detached kind of, yeah, let's have a think. Yeah, curious, that's the word. I was then sitting pretty much in this spot about a month or two ago going, so how do you want to live your life? How do you want your daily life to look? How do you want to earn your money, spend your money? How do you want to cook? How do you want to dress? Because I think we carry so much of what our parents have told us, that kind of imprint, like, we just carry that into our lives without even realizing it. And I was like, actually, you know what? On Sundays, I would like to have a croissant and a cup of tea, and I would like to eat it in bed. And that's what I like. And it's such a small thing, but like, that's something that I was not brought up with. That's not something that you do. You're kind of, weekends, you're up early, you clean. Like, those are your cleaning days. Those are your, your batch cooking days, or your whatever. So, like, resting, massive guilt, spending money, massive, like, all these things, massive, like, any sort of treating yourself. Say that because I don't know, I don't like the word treat when it comes to humans, because I'm like, we're not dogs, but fair. Like a different word for it. So I think I'm still in a massive, like, questioning phase, and now I'm going back for 3 weeks in between places, and I am going to be triggered AF. But I'm also like, it's okay, all this stuff, like, this is what it's like, it's fine. But yeah, I think the mental toll it takes on, I think we need to talk about that more. And it's not necessarily a kind of, I'm really worried about talking about parents in general, because people are going to be like, well, actually, my parents beat me and kept me in the coal shed, so, like, you didn't have it harder. And it's like, it's all trauma and it's all relative, and it all affects us, and nobody's parents get it right. Like, your parents could be incredible, no one's parents get it right, because they're just also completely flawed human beings.
Yeah.
Like we all are. So yeah, I think more chat around the mental toll of living with your family.
Absolutely. You could start a podcast about that. I think it would be really
Oh my
interesting.
God, actually, yeah.
Good. You should.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I'm just imagining all the possibilities for your podcast now.
You're amazing. Why didn't we have this conversation like 6 months ago? Like a year ago, when I was like, what am I doing?
Yeah, but you know what? Like I have found, and you might have found the same thing that like, you know, like you said, you just like went to bed and like there was a long period where just creative thoughts, things, ideas were just not happening,
Yeah.
and now I feel like I'm in a much more fertile kind of zone where I can actually start to contemplate the future and like making things and talking about things. Yeah, so you know, you have to go through those kind of fallow
Yeah.
to
And
have
also like other people seem to be doing stuff. There were some people that were like straight off the bat were like doing online gigs, doing car park gigs, doing what was the other things that people were doing?
a lot of people got book deals. I mean, you got a book deal, but I there was a while there where a lot of our kind of comedy networks, it was just like every other week, it's like, I got a book deal, guys. And my partner John, who you know, was like, oh no, everyone's writing a book except me. But
oh
he was really early on the online gigs, so
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, of course, because I remember. Yeah, yeah. And
you
there was
did some
some,
of
and
them.
that was very much when I did that gig, I was still very much in the bed phase. I was still very much in the kind of like, oh my God, now I've got to talk to people. Like I feel, and some people I think thrive off the kind of chaos and the manic energy of it all. And that makes me clam up. That makes me go, no, thank you. I can't really create because I'm not in the best headspace.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. And it's important to know that about yourself and then to not feel guilty if you're not being productive, quote unquote, because that is also
Gosh.
a fallacy of capitalism.
Yes, one of the biggest things I've learned over the past
Yeah,
year. Yeah.
totally. Um, what is the biggest financial mistake you've ever made? Or a big one? It doesn't have to be the biggest. That's,
Getting a career development loan to go to drama school.
ooh, tell me more, tell me more.
It was disgustingly high interest rates.
Uh-huh.
They wanted the money pretty much like a month after you graduated.
Oh,
It took me 5 years to pay off, which is not a massive amount if you think about other people's debts.
Mhm.
But it was crippling,
Especially for an early career actor. Like,
especially when you're 20.
oh
Yeah.
no. Oh, that's a lot.
Yeah, that was the biggest financial mistake, definitely.
I mean, but it sounds so like positive, right? I'm going to develop my career and I'm going to get, is it a bank loan or is it
Yeah,
government?
yeah, it was with the bank. And it was just, yeah, just awful. Just I was like, I wasn't constantly in arrears, but I just felt like I was constantly kind of catching my tail and like being like, what are they going to do? What's going to happen? And scary letters and, and all of that. And it was, I think it was like the only option as well to go to my drama school because it wasn't one of these drama schools that was like accredited by a university. So
Right.
you couldn't pay university fees. You had to pay drama school fees that, and you couldn't get, maintenance grants or anything like that. And,
Mhm.
they were like, oh, you can maybe I ask our patrons for some money or maybe, and I was like maybe I should have done that. Maybe, but I was 18 and I was like, oh, no one's going to give me any money. Let me just go for this career development loan.
Sure.
And got the full whack for like the 2 years, which covered, I think it covered my fees, but that's about it. I don't know. Anyway, it makes me sick even thinking about it because for ages I was like, oh, I really regret going to drama school. What a waste of money. And it's like, I don't think it's that I regret going to drama school. I
Mhm.
think I regret that financial decision. And maybe if I'd had some advice and if somebody had spoken to me about it, if there was the information out there,
Mm.
somebody could have gone, hey, do you know what would be best is if you just stayed with your parents for an extra year or so.
Work for a year.
work for a year, save all your money, and then go to drama school and have that cushion. So yeah, bloody talk about these things.
Yeah, totally. Oh wow. Because yeah, I assume those kinds of loans are designed for like people who are going off to like do a master's that will then increase their income
Yeah,
by
yeah.
20%. Then, but then, someone at the bank should have spoken to you as well, right? They shouldn't
Yeah,
be like, yes, I'm giving this 18-year-olds this huge amount of
right. A
that
huge amount of cash.
they
Yeah,
don't understand. Like you don't understand that when you're 18,
yeah,
do you? Like,
yeah. Of course.
yeah, but I mean, it sounds like you need to forgive 18-year-old Sook.
Oh my God, I do. Thank you.
I forgive her because it's yeah, you didn't have all the info
Oh my
and
gosh, you're so. Do you know what? I didn't even realize I was holding on to that. Thank you.
it's okay.
I'm a bit emotional.
Yeah, and obviously you got a lot out of going to drama school. You are now a performer, a writer, creator, so it set you on the right path.
Yeah, definitely. A very circuitous path. Is that
Yeah.
the word? But I actually met a friend of mine from drama school as well the other day, and I'd not seen her in a couple of years. And I was like, oh, I don't regret going. I don't like, if I had my time again, sure, I'd do things differently. But also, if my grandmother had wheels, she'd be a bike. Like, it's like, sure, like shoulda, woulda, coulda, right?
Yeah.
But yeah. But I think this is why I'm so passionate about even things like when you do gigs and stuff, especially between women, because we know about the disparity between like how men are paid and women are paid, is that I really wish that women would be like, by the way, don't take less than X amount of money for this gig.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, that to me is like true solidarity.
Absolutely it is.
Not being like, I've spoken to like female comedians before and they've gone, actually, I really don't feel comfortable telling you how much I'm getting paid for that, or like how much they pay. And I'm like, guys, like, not talking about money is what makes it so shameful.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like, we need to, like, exactly what you're doing is like you're bringing it to the light and talking about money. And like, don't get me wrong, when I was like, when I logged on, also because I was doing anxiety, like breathing to help my anxiety about 20 minutes before we jumped on the call. And because I'm having my nose pierced straight after this. And
Yes.
so I was like, I'm just going to do some Wim Hof, like breathing and stuff to like get a bit high off it as well. And I was like feeling quite grounded. And then I was like logged on. I was like, shit, what am I going to talk to Viv about? Is it about money? Is it about? And then when you said it, like I had, like my physical reaction was, we're going to talk about money, especially because of my spiral last night in bed, where I was like, how am I going to afford this? What's going to happen? Blah blah blah. My costs are going up, and what if I don't get any money? And what if I did? What am I going to do? What if I can't pay my rent? All of that is like, that's an old story. That's an old narrative that I have when I did not have a lot of money and everything was borrowing from here to pay there, and juggling and stuff. So this has been actually really therapeutic. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. I have loved talking to you. The last question I always ask my guests is, what advice would you give to your younger self? Maybe, we've already covered the advice about the loan.
I don't think they do them anymore. They probably got ruled out as being, unethical or something. The hard ones. What advice would I give?
A younger self or a younger, someone who came to you who was, 20-year-old. I want to be like you.
Oh, I don't want to give a blanket statement like save, like just save. Here's what I'm going to say. Don't believe people who are like, it's wasteful. The reason you don't have any money is because you buy lattes and avocado toast and crap like that. And that's the reason that you're poor, for example. It's nothing. It's like, rather than, I would say, always focus on increasing your income rather than completely cutting back on the things that make life more bearable.
Totally. It is more powerful to make more money than to save.
Yeah. And especially when you're like, if you're on a minimum wage like I was for years, or years and years and years, it's like, well, where else can I save? Like, I'm already living on beans, like, or what else can I do? And also, this can also lead to then you going, splurging every now and again, and then kind of, you might end up in financial trouble because of that, because you're kind of trying to, it's like a binge, trying to kind of hold it in. I would say look at the value of what you're spending your money on. So not necessarily the monetary value. So if you're like, for example, like this workspace, that's going to have a massive amount of value for me and is going to really positively impact my work and my mental health. And I can't really put a number on that. Whereas me buying a pan of chocolat because I've had a shitty day, and then I'm just going to probably feel a bit grim after that and be like, oh, actually, it was a bit stale anyway, because it was the end of the day and I probably shouldn't have had that. And then I'm going to be like, I can't believe it's like so overpriced. That is not going to be great. Like, not in terms of it's not like food shaming or anything, but that's probably doesn't have the same amount of value. So it's like, maybe look at the value of everything that you spend on, invest in yourself in whatever way that looks like for you, and question why you're spending your money. So like, am I buying this to make myself feel better, to get that temporary thrill from like retail therapy, or am I buying this because this is going to enhance and enrich my life?
That's very wise.
Thanks.
Very wise. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Had a wonderful morning, and good luck with getting your nose pierced.
Thank you so much. Do you have yours pierced?
No, I don't. I've thought about it, but
it would really suit you.
Oh, thank you. I'll think about it more then.
Yeah, do it. Yeah, do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to the Artists Make Money podcast. You can find us on Instagram at Artists Make Money, where you can also sign up for our weekly newsletter. You can find me on Twitter at Vivegan41, and you'll find Sukh on Twitter and Instagram at Sukh Ojla. We'll link that up in the show notes. You can pre-order her debut novel, Sunny, now. The link is in our show notes. The music for this podcast is composed by Tiiva, and you can find them at Tiiva Music. That will be linked in the show notes as well. If you enjoyed the show, I would love it if you would give it a follow and share it with a friend, or write a lovely review on Apple Podcasts. Just for my own vanity, I'm going to read one that I got last month that I'm very flattered by. This is from Green Man Tom, 5 stars, essential. Maybe the most essential podcast out there for those working in or looking to work in the arts. An intelligent, warm and personal look at the practicalities and pitfalls of trying to make a living in an industry where sensible business practice is rarely even mentioned, and where self-worth can be so deeply tied to financial success. Vivienne is an astute and empathic host who never takes the spotlight away from the guest and asks just the right amount of well-chosen questions. If you're serious about making your creativity a part of your living, then I can't recommend this enough. Green Man Tom, I'm so touched by that, and I would love it if it inspired everyone to go out and record a similarly enthusiastic podcast review, and because I'm sure, as you know, all creators love to have positive reviews. Being an artist is hard, and making a living from it is even harder, but I believe in you. Keep going.